Welcome to Wednesday's Weekly, a weekly information session in collaboration with the voluntary sector and public sector partners. This week, the host is Martin Hazlehurst from the Greater Manchester Nutrition and Hydration Programme. Over to you, Martin.
Thank you. Just a quick introduction and tell you a bit about what I'm going to do for the next hour. I'm Martin Hazlehurst, as Hayley said, from the Greater Manchester Nutrition and Hydration Programme. We work across Greater Manchester. We're currently receive funding from the Health and Social Care Partnership, and we're funded up until next March. This is our third year. For 2 years, we worked in 5 boroughs in Rochdale, Oldham, Stockport, Bolton and Bury. We've now extended our reach to the other authorities and are developing the programme there. The purpose of the programme is to firstly raise awareness of the problems of older people and undernourishment and dehydration. So different from many other programmes, our concern is people who are undernourished. We're also developing processes, developing resources, developing ways of people addressing undernourishment and dehydration. What I'm going to do this morning is I'm going to, in a minute, change to a presentation. Going to look at what the causes of undernourishment and dehydration are, look at ways in which you can identify and talk to older people about their appetite and drinking habits, and then after that, things that you can do in your capacity as workers or volunteers in helping older people. So I'm going to change to the screen. Let's hope this comes up. Have you got it?
Yeah, we've got it.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. So that first thing is why we focus on malnutrition and dehydration. Why does it happen? How to identify someone and what you can do. And finally, at the end, I'm going to talk to you about some resources and other information that you can access. To start with, I've got a quote from the World Health Organization about the COVID-19 pandemic, just to say that I am going to talk about the impact of COVID on undernourishment and dehydration. Some of the stuff that I'll talk about are ways that we used to do things, and hopefully we will get back to doing things, but there'll also be information about the current situation. So this quote is, "Support for older people, their families and their caregivers is an essential part of the country's comprehensive response to the pandemic. During times of isolation and quarantine, older people need safe access to nutritious food, basic supplies, money, medicine to support their physical health and social care. Dissemination of accurate information is critical," and that's what we're about. Okay, what I'm going to start with is, if it works, a short video.
Could save the lives of thousands of our older people. The PaperWeight Armband, which was first conceived in Salford 3 years ago, it tells health professionals if somebody is malnourished simply by whether it fits around their upper arm.
Well, it's now about being rolled out across Greater Manchester, where it's estimated more than 60,000 older people live with malnutrition. Rob Smith reports.
So what we'll do, we'll put it on this arm and snuggle it in, and that's absolutely fine.
A simple piece of paper can show if an older person's malnourished. It's made to the minimum expected size of the upper arm. Too tight or won't go round, they're eating enough. Too loose, they're eating too little. Margaret McKenna from Salford knows how that can harm health. Her weight fell after a bout of illness, like so many people in their 70s and 80s.
It went down to 7 stone. From 10 or 10 and a half at once.
That's one heck of a drop.
That was a drop. But before that, I lost confidence and I wouldn't go out.
Medics designed the armband to prevent the conditions malnutrition brings on. It's being rolled out across Greater Manchester and it could save the NHS millions. Some people can't be weighed. You can't carry scales all around everywhere to weigh people, and you know, it can be simply used this armband by anyone, by the fire service, by carers, by the family, and it just kind of marks people out, you know, as that could be potentially at risk.
Getting those at risk out of their homes for a meal is another goal of the team behind the armband. Pensioners eat more when they eat together at this lunch club, and every calorie counts, but some wrongly believe weight loss is a natural part of growing older.
Don't just dismiss that as, okay, well, it's normal because they're becoming old, because actually there are practical things that people can do in their own home to reduce their risk of becoming malnourished. Quite a lot of the time, these people aren't getting picked up until they are seriously quite ill, or they've lost their independence to an extent that they're being admitted into a care home.
An outcome a strip of paper and eating well can prevent. Rob Smith, ITV News, Salford.
Solution.
Oops. Okay, thanks. I'm going to talk to you about the PaperWeight Armband a little bit later. That was a piece that was on Granada Reports last year about the programme. So I want to start with, why are we focusing on malnutrition? First of all, it's a hidden problem. It is estimated 1 million people over the age of 65 are at risk of malnutrition. And importantly, 93% of those are living at home. It's all around us. A third of recent nourished or at risk. And the consequence, for every 10 days a person over the age of 80 is in hospital, they lose 10% of muscle mass. As Emma, my director, said on that little clip, it is preventable. Losing weight is not a natural part of growing old. And that's a message that we've tried to get across to people, older people themselves, who often say to us, but I'm old now and it's natural that I lose weight. It isn't natural. If someone is losing weight, either they are not eating enough or they have other medical conditions. And it's expensive. Malnutrition costs the health and social care system around £20 billion a year. And the older you are, the more likely you will be at risk. I think these messages are ones that we've been pushing for 2 years. We hope that they have started to get through, and we continue to promote these simple messages. So, looking at this, this is a slide we did recently, but actually it's estimated that malnutrition costs the NHS twice as much as obesity in older people. Not many people say they don't believe that, but that's the NHS's own figures of how much it costs. And those costs are in people being admitted to hospital, are in people staying longer in hospital because of undernourishment or dehydration, that it's the costs of falls, the costs of home care, and people admitted to care homes. I've met many older people over the last 2 years whose the principal reason they've gone into a care home is because it's felt that they weren't eating and they were becoming malnourished and dehydrated. So dealing with that in the community can cost greatly. Just quickly about COVID, that one of the things that we are finding and we are learning as the pandemic carries on is that many of the factors that are leading to people becoming malnourished are becoming greater because of the COVID pandemic. Firstly, more and more older people are isolated in their own homes. They're finding it difficult to access food. The food that they can access isn't giving them the protein and goodness that they need, and are becoming more depressed. Mental health is a huge issue in a cause of malnourishment and isolation, and we hear all kinds of stories. People saying it's not worth cooking for one. My wife used to do all the cooking. or I can't get out to get my shopping. So those factors are increasing during COVID. Also, there's more and more evidence that people who've been in hospital with COVID-19 are experiencing high levels of weight loss, and not just those who've been in hospital. And that's being exacerbated by the regular COVID symptom of loss of taste and smell, loss of sensitive taste and smell, which is actually putting people off eating. So all the indications are that one of the consequences of COVID will be another spike in older people being undernourished and dehydrated. I just want to share with you some findings from our research. We, as part of our program, had a University of Manchester commissioned evaluation report that did research with all our stakeholders, all the people we're working with, but also it identified a number of older people who used the armband, and the armband suggested that they were undernourished. What we did is we gave these older people our information, we gave them advice, the researcher visited and weighed them, and then went back in 12 weeks. One of the things, this slide shows us some of the things that the research found was contributing to people becoming undernourished. We found a lot of people with the problem they were experiencing was about the dietary advice that they were being given. That people, certainly people who have diabetes, people with COPD, people with cardiovascular conditions, are told to reduce fats and sugars for very good reason. However, one of the consequences of that was that they were losing weight quickly, and the report recommended that there is a much more sophisticated way of looking at that. Frailty is a big contributor. The 80 older people we followed, that there was a strong correlation between where they figured on frailty indices actually met their weight loss and being underweight. So the less frail a person, the more likely they will have a positive outcome if you give information. Social activities and social isolation was a big issue. Of course, it says here attending activities such as lunch clubs or having a good network of friends. And that highlights the problem we've had during the COVID period, that lunch clubs are not meeting anymore. People are shielding and are not having visitors. So the sooner we can get people back in social settings, the more likely it is that we can improve their weight. Being well connected to council, NHS or third sector support was another key factor. Another huge issue in undernourishment is oral health, and particularly finding in care homes that poor oral health is a contributor to not eating properly. I mean, that's common sense. If your mouth hurts, you're not going to eat. If eating is painful, you're not going to eat. So we have to pay a lot more attention than we do at the moment to older people's oral health, including dentures. Dentures that don't fit are a trauma for older people. One of the things that the report found was that the weight loss often associated with a trauma of some kind. So many people told us that they lost weight after having an illness, having an accident, suffering bereavement, or other changes. And that trauma was a surprise, well, not surprising, but a very common factor in living. Living conditions, people who need support with daily living, appropriate housing plays a key role. So we actually found that people living in sheltered housing settings all the people we followed were in the community. People who live in sheltered housing settings had a better outcome of being able to change their diet, to add to their diet with the support of people. So that was big. Smoking can be a key factor in poor appetite. Physical activity can provide motivation for action. It's known that having a cigarette before a meal suppresses your appetite. So one of the things we say to people who do smoke is, don't smoke for half an hour before you have a meal. Also, don't have a drink of water before you have a meal, because that can also suppress your appetite. And dementia, oops, sorry, I didn't want to do that. Dementia is a big factor. People have problems, that appetite is reduced. People have problems eating. People don't recognize the food the same. They might have a loss of sense of taste associated with dementia. Just quickly, we followed 80, it was between 80 and 90 older people as in the research. As I said, we gave them advice. We followed them up after 12 weeks and found that of these 80, 66% of them had gained some weight after 12 weeks after receiving the advice that we gave. 19% lost weight and 15% stayed the same. But given that many of those people were losing weight prior to receiving the information, we were quite surprised, pleasantly surprised, very pleasantly surprised, that of the 80 people we followed, 81% of them had a good outcome. Okay, before I move on, is there any questions, any thoughts, any comments? Okay. I'm going to move on to looking at how to identify someone who is losing weight. Someone may not necessarily be clinically underweight, which is defined as having a BMI of less than 20, but there are signs that people are losing weight. They're quite big. Dentures are a big thing. Also hearing aids. I did some work with the audiology service in Rochdale, and they told me that one of the things that they notice and they recognise is if people go to see them because their hearing aids don't fit anymore, it's often because they've lost weight recently. So loose dentures is a sign of, quite obviously, thin arms or legs. Rings and watches are a big sign. If you notice that people are not, the rings and watches not fitting properly, loose shoes, and clothes. Very often we meet people who've lost weight whose clothes don't often fit. There are also verbal signs. I've got a poor appetite. People often talk to us about how they don't eat as much as they used to. They find it hard to eat meals. They tell us they've lost weight without trying. They feel tired. It's difficult to get to the shops. It's difficult to cook just for one. One of the things that we did find, and I found certainly in Rochdale, where I spent a lot of time visiting lunch clubs, other centres where older people congregate and eat before COVID, one of the things that was very common was for me to hear people telling me, oh, I've got a terrible appetite, I hardly ever eat anything, but while they're tucking into a 3-course meal at a lunch club. And so the powers of social eating are immense, and many people said they didn't really have many meals at home, but would eat when they go out. So the sooner we can get people back to social eating, the better. And it again highlights the problems that COVID is bringing in terms of people's appetite and weight. Let me talk about hydration. As I go around places, as I talk to groups of older people, I find I have a lot more conversations with them about hydration than I do about eating. Many people say they don't drink enough. Many people know that they don't drink enough for all kinds of reasons. That they, particularly people with dementia, find that the sense of thirst disappears, so they don't know they're thirsty. Many older people tell me that they don't drink before they go out because they don't want to have to go to the toilet. They don't drink after a certain time of day because they don't want to get up to go to the toilet at night. One of the myths that we try to debunk is that if you drink a reasonable amount, and it's recommended everybody drink 6 to 8 cups of glasses of fluid a day, if you drink a reasonable amount, you won't go to the toilet any more than if you don't drink anything. People don't, that is true, and you avoid all the dangers. Looking out for signs of dehydration. Does everyone know the pinch test? The back of the hand. If you pinch the back of the hand and the skin doesn't go back to normal, it's a very rough test. There is no absolute test for dehydration, but dry skin is one sign. Also, the colour of urine is a general test. If the darker someone's urine is, the more likely it is that they are dehydrated. However, it's not an absolute test. It's not always an accurate indicator. For example, some medications will affect the colour of urine, but if someone tells you that their wee is very dark, it's useful to assume that they're dehydrated and to give them advice. One of the questions that I get asked a lot is, well, what counts as fluid for hydration? Many older people I meet say they thought that tea and coffee were not good for hydrating you. There is nothing wrong with tea and coffee as a means of hydration. If someone is drinking quite a few cups of tea a day, then they are getting hydration. Beer, wine, spirits, obviously not good for hydration, because they do act as diuretics. So the advice I give to people is keep an eye on how much you're drinking, make sure you drink regularly, even if it's keeping a glass of water by the side of you, making sure what you're drinking is something you like. Many other people don't like water, but they will drink lots of cups of tea or juice. So it's about finding something you like and making sure that you get 6 to 8 glasses a day. The consequences of dehydration are immense. That it can create urine infections, it can create confusion, lack of balance. It's estimated that half the people who go to hospital because of falls, that dehydration is a factor in them falling. So one of the things we've been doing in Rochdale is making sure that the falls team have our information and they can make hydration an important issue. And also it's reducing costs. Okay, on the film we talked about the PaperWeight Armband. This is a PaperWeight Armband, and we have supplies of these. If you work in a setting where you think it can be useful to have these, my contact details will be at the end, and I can let you have as many as you want. They go around the upper arm of someone, and as it showed on the film, if they meet and move up and down, that is an absolute dead certainty that someone has a BMI of less than 20 and is underweight. I use this particularly in group settings, and it's almost a game. It's almost, let's all try the armband on each other. Let's try, and that way you can, in kind of non-stigmatizing way, identify people who may need advice and help. But there are, this is, we use it. It's being used by district nurses and people like that, where they can't carry scales around them to do BMI testing. It's a very quick and easy way of identifying undernourishment. Okay, are there any thoughts, questions? No? Okay. What you can do. Our research showed that simple conversations can make a big difference for older people at risk of malnutrition. So if you know someone or work with someone who you come across, someone who is losing weight, who is underweight, simple advice can make a difference. The advice that we gave the people in the research usually lasted about 10 minutes, just introducing them to some simple ideas of how they could eat more. Encouragement. One of the things that I've been doing during the COVID period is working with Age UK Salford on their shopping service and their welfare calls. And I found that simple questions can start a conversation about whether people are eating enough. What did you have for your tea tonight? What are you going to have to do for your tea tonight? What kinds of things have you been eating? And importantly at the moment, how are you getting your food supplies? So we are all about working with people who are working with older people, about giving them the information, giving you the information that you can help, and encouraging you to be aware, to have conversations with people. So we have some key questions that we encourage people to ask. If you're concerned about someone who is looking underweight or looks thinner than they're used to, simple questions. Have you lost weight without meaning to? Have you had a poor appetite, low energy or low mood? Do your clothes, shoes, jewelry or dentures feel or look or feel loose? Do you think you might be underweight? They're very simple questions, a very simple test of whether people. I'll come to the Eat, Drink, Live Well booklet in a minute. We're asking people to be out there, working people, asking simple questions, identifying people who may be underweight. Not all loss of weight is simply about not eating enough. Some conditions like COPD, like cancer, like dementia, and the people who with diabetes who are asked to go on with low fat, low carbohydrate diet. So if you meet someone whose weight loss has been sudden and dramatic, if they have difficulty swallowing, if they have pain when eating, if there's been a change in bowel movements, or their underlying medical conditions like diabetes or COPD, we say in those cases, the information and the advice that we give is not appropriate, and that's an issue for a GP or other medical professional. Also, we would also suggest that anyone who you feel is at risk of malnutrition should be encouraged to see their dentist, particularly if they have a sore mouth. That it is an enormous, particularly in care homes, we're finding oral health is not something which is given the priority that perhaps it should. Particularly people with dentures I had lots of examples of people in care homes who lose their dentures or find that they're wearing somebody else's dentures, or all kinds of things happening that affect oral health. And in Rochdale there is a specific program going on about oral health, particularly in care homes, but also with home care agencies, which is about providing advice and resources that will help, particularly with teeth cleaning. Okay. Food is much more than just fuel. It's linked to enjoyment, socialization, and routine. Again, this is difficult when older people are feeling more isolated, but as people start to get out more, it's important that we get back to food is something that people enjoy. It's not easy. I have a 90-year-old father who was shielding. It was a trial to keep him indoors, and the first thing he did when he was told that perhaps he can go outside again was make sure he went out with his mates to the cafe and had something to eat, something he used to do 2-3 times a week before. And it's important that we, whilst keeping safe, that we do encourage people to socialise. Eating in company, again, this was more pre-COVID, but talking about diet, talking about food, talking about what you like and what are good for you is interesting. Some people may need support. A lot of my time over the last 2 years has been spent working with home care agencies who very often are responsible for people preparing people's meals, which creates its own problems because of the time they have. We recommend that if people are having problems cooking, there are some very good food companies like Wiltshire Farm Foods, like Oak House Foods, people who deliver ready meals to people, who can tailor ready meals to people's particular needs, and provide nutritious food. Ready meals are fine. Ready meals are fine. Probably not the very cheapest ones, which have far too much fat and salt in them. But if people can afford it, then having ready meals delivered is a good way of getting good food. Poor nutrition and hydration can be a cause and consequence of poor mental health. An improvement in these can lead to an improvement in the other. And I think that cycle of mental health and lack of appetite and not eating is one that has to be broken at both ends. Okay, I'm going to introduce this to you. These are available free to anyone. I can provide as many copies as this as anyone would want. It's our main booklet. And what this does is, this is a booklet we give to older people. It's the main resource that we have. We go through the booklet with them, and it gives some very simple tips. First of all, if big meals are difficult, then we recommend that people eat less but more often. 6 small meals a day are far more beneficial than 3 big meals if the big meals are not being eaten. And that was one of the things that, in our research, it was one of the things that people tried to do and did, and it had effects. We talk about fortifying food. That one of the ways that people can get more protein and calories from the same amount of food is by adding stuff to it. So we recommend that people put cream in soup, put grated cheese in mashed potato, anything that produces cream and dairy and cheese and things like that, which provide more protein and calories. Adding them to food is a great way of adding to the nutritional value of food. This was the one thing that made the biggest difference in our research. First of all, saying to people, buy full fat milk, not skimmed or semi-skimmed. I've met many older people who are losing weight, who, because they've always drank skimmed milk, because in earlier times I've met women who were dieting, more women than men, who were always on diets and ate skimmed food. As they've got older, they haven't changed their eating habits, but they started to lose much more weight than they wanted to. So using full fat milk, not skimmed milk. Also buying skimmed milk, buying a tub like Marvel and products like that. If you add that to milk, then that again increases the amount of protein and that's in the food. In our research, many people increase their weight by just doing that one thing of changing to full fat milk and adding skimmed milk. Have more protein, add extra pieces of meat or tinned lentils into soups, casseroles, stews or pies. There are other things. There was an older woman in Rochdale who was part of our research, who the only change she made to her diet after our advice was she started eating peanut butter from the jar, and in 12 weeks she put on 3 kilos. It was terrifying for me because I love peanut butter, but simple things, simple advice, simple solutions can have an effect. Eat with others. Again, this is a slide we used before the pandemic. Eating socially has an enormous effect on people. One of the things we've been doing at Age UK Salford is introducing meals over Zoom for older people who have access to Zoom, of getting little small groups of people together to eat together, but do it over video rather than all together, and that's been very popular among some people. Also, I mentioned this before, make meal preparation easier. Buy full fat ready meals and snacks to heat in the microwave. One of the difficulties that we find, and one of the things that came up in our research, was not just people wanting to eat, it was people not having the mobility or the energy to cook for themselves, and yet saying to us, oh, but ready meals are not good for me. Ready meals are fine, and we encourage people to eat ready meals. Okay, any thoughts about those tips from the booklet? Okay. So finally, some very final messages. You don't need to be an expert, and that's our main message to people. It's about encouraging people to make small changes that will make a big difference. Many people may not have realised that they were underweight, or more likely they know that they're underweight, but they didn't know there was something they could do about it. And if you're worried, you can see the GP or contact the local community dietitian. We work very closely with the dietetic service in Rochdale, Oldham and Tameside and the other boroughs. We're finding that a combination of the very specialist help and the access to food supplements that dietitians can bring alongside the information that we've been given has been very useful, particularly during the pandemic when dietetics teams have not been able to get out to see clients, and many of them have been redeployed into other services. So over in Rochdale, during the period of the pandemic, our booklet has gone to every client of the dietetic service. It's available in GP surgeries. It's available, we hope, everywhere. It's been sent out, our information has been sent out with food delivery services, with council communications and letters, with every RBH resident over 65 has received our information. We've been getting out information as far and wide as we possibly can. But there are situations which do require specialist help. Also, for people who have difficulty swallowing, then it's important that that's referred to speech and language therapists. Okay. What can I do? We're asking everyone to raise awareness with friends, family, neighbours and colleagues. One of the things which has been a feature of the programme as I've gone around training people and doing these kinds of presentations to people, I've done presentations to over 500 people, short training courses to over 500 people in Rochdale over the last 2 years. But one of the features of those has been how many people have said, "Oh, I ought to take this information from my father. I ought to take this information from my neighbour. I ought to take this information from friends." So it's about everyone being more aware, asking older people the key questions, and sharing simple advice, having access to our booklet, everything that we have, and I'll mention some more booklets and resources in a minute, is on our website, Age UK Salford. If you go to Age UK Salford and click on the About Us button, you will find all our information and our short videos, and we have videos on cooking out of the store cupboard, cooking, fortified meals, a lot of information on our website. You can support our social media, and also the Age UK YouTube channel has all the videos and other things that we've done. If you're a worker or a service manager, one of the things I'm doing is trying to make sure that as many parts of adult social care, NHS and voluntary organisations are incorporating questions and nutrition and hydration in assessment processes in all interactions with older people, and put older people's nutrition and hydration on the agenda and considering strategic planning and COVID recovery planning, which is now going to be an enormous issue for us. Okay, I've told you about some of that. These are things that you can find on our website. You can find copies of this. You can find a booklet of recipes which use mainly tinned and frozen food. We produced that near the beginning of the pandemic because we realised that people were saying that they couldn't get out to buy fresh food as much. So we produced a book of recipes using tinned food. We've produced a book of recipes which is about high energy meals and snacks that you can use. We've produced a booklet which is using the information which is in our Eat Well booklet, but providing meals and snacks from a range of cultures, particularly South Asian cultures, and that was in response to people saying that our information in here is very English. It has a whole range of menus in the back which tend to be quite European, so we produced that booklet. Also, there is particular information that we have which is about eating and drinking well with dementia. We have two guides, both of which were produced by people at University of Bournemouth and are excellent. One of them is about a guide for family carers and friends, and the other is a guide for care home staff. And we have copies of those if anyone wants them. We also have links to Vegetarian for Life resources, We've been asked a lot of times for information and advice for older vegetarians and how they can continue to get the protein and calories they need. That's my email address. I'm assuming I can, if you want, I can circulate all these slides to you afterwards. I'm sure that will be possible, but there's my email address. Finally, we have, if you feel that you need to know more, if you want to have access to a bit more clinical advice and a bit more medically geared advice, we have an e-learning tool which is available at paperweightarmband.org.uk. It covers malnutrition and swallowing difficulties, dysphagia, and was produced for us by specialists at Salford Royal. So if you want to know more, go to our e-learning tool. It takes about 40-45 minutes to complete, but provides a great deal more information. Thank you very much.